And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, Alvin Bragg's, crowning political show trial is almost over. The closing arguments are in the books, and soon 12 jurors selected from one of the most anti-Trump districts in the entire country. They will decide the fate of Donald Trump pending appeal. Now, today, the prosecution asked jurors to throw caution to the wind, convict the former president of a crime that they were never able to explain, let alone prove it. In fact, Bragg wants the jury to hand down 34 felony convictions based on what we have been saying from the beginning, a novel legal theory surrounding a misdemeanor document labeling allegation well past the statute of limitations, upcharged to a felony because of this mysterious election law violation that was never charged or prosecuted ever anywhere in America. And this entire convoluted case relies on one witness, a convicted liar, admitted liar, disbarred lawyer by the name of Michael Cohen. Now, we have talked in detail about Bragg's ulterior motives and Cohen's utter lack of credibility. We have talked about a judge that should have recused himself. But tonight, another major story is emerging, and it surrounds the judge, and that's Juan Merchan. The Biden donating judge has now placed basically cinder blocks on the scales of justice. First, he attempted to silence Donald Trump with an unconstitutional gag order. Next, he allowed the prosecution to run wild with speculation and insinuate in court that Trump was guilty of phantom election violations that were charged or that weren't even charged or prosecuted. Merchan then allowed a shady cast of characters that the prosecution called to the stand to say whatever. Stormy Daniels can talk about ghosts and dead people, tell raunchy stories and bad jokes that were in no way relevant or material to the case. The judge also allowed Michael Cohen to profit from his testimony and apparently, according to the defense attorneys, lie on the stand repeatedly. According to our own Trey Gowdy, the defense gave up objecting because it was almost never sustained by the judge. But when it came to the defense, Judge Merchan sustained almost every objection. What is he doing? Hamstringing witnesses, yelling at Trump's lawyers, openly rebuking one witness in front of the jury. Judge Merchan's disdain for all things Trump, it was palpable from beginning to end. But his adherence to the law was nowhere to be found. This is, by every measure, a travesty of justice perpetrated by Judge Juan Merchan. Make no mistakes, there is no credible evidence in this case of any crime committed by Donald J. Trump. The prosecution's star witness was not just a thief, but also admitted convicted liar. And as Trump's attorneys put it, Cohen is the MVP of liars. In closing arguments, they referred to Cohen as the GLOAT, the greatest liar of all time. He lied on his taxes. He lied to his bank. He lied to the Mueller investigation team. He lied to a federal judge. He lied to Congress on multiple occasions, lied to his family, and lied to the media. And during this current trial, Cohen was accused of lying on the stand during multiple occasions. Keep in mind, a non-disclosure agreement, it is not a crime. Paying a publication, working with a publication like the National Enquirer, what they call catch and kill about a story, that is also not a crime. The prosecution wants jurors to believe that the way those payments were labeled was incorrect and illegal and some type of federal election fraud. These payments were to Trump's attorney. They were labeled a legal expense because that's what they were. Ultimately, the burden of proof is supposed to be with the prosecution, and they have proved nothing. And by the way, where's the evidence that Donald Trump, because intent matters here, where is the intention that he violated the law? Where's the evidence that he committed an election violation? Why should anyone believe that Michael Cohen is telling the truth this time? But of course, Judge Juan Merchan, well, he has done his best to basically tip the scales of justice with cinder blocks, constantly giving the prosecution whatever they want, while severely limiting the defense around every turn. This is not justice in America. This is lawfare being waged by a Biden-loving prosecutor with the help of a Biden-donating judge to be decided by a jury from the borough of Manhattan in New York City, where Biden won just shy of 90% of the vote. There's no crime. There's no evidence of a crime. There's no credibility in this case. But a jury might well vote to convict simply because Donald Trump is on trial with a judge that obviously wants him convicted. What did I say from the beginning of this trial? Donald Trump cannot get a fair trial in New York City, regardless of the outcome. He did not get a fair trial in New York City. And for the record, Mar-a-Lago is not worth only $18 million, much closer to $1 billion, maybe more. But according to the Biden White House, this is fair and equal justice. It's not political, except today, well, the Biden campaign, they decided to have a campaign photo op in front of the courthouse. Now, of course, Joe wasn't there. In his place, the campaign rolled out the 80-year-old Robert De Niro to rant and rave and hem and haw and yell and pretend to be a tough guy like he was in Goodfellas. Take a look.
This city is pretty accommodating. We make room for clowns. We have them all over the city. People who do crazy things in the street, we tolerate it. It's part of the city. It's part of the culture. But not a person like Trump. Under Trump, this kind of government will perish from the earth. I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave.
Forget about it. All right. Anyway, like Biden, De Niro's best years are behind him. Sadly, he suffers from one of the worst cases of Trump derangement syndrome we've ever seen. Contrary to what you heard from De Niro, the greatest threat to our American republic, this great republic of ours, this constitutional republic, is not from the guy facing real prison time because of this political show trial. Instead, it would be the far-left prosecutors, the bureaucrats who have turned your system of justice into a tool for political retribution. Our constitutional republic, be damned. Equal justice under the law, be damned. Equal application of our laws, be damned. Welcome to Joe Biden's America. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.